So we've basically finished the legs. Next we're going to be working on the controls for the head and for the abdomen. I'll start by working on the hierarchy, so we'll get a reparent joints node for this. This node will be plugged in between my reparent legs node and my visibility node. I'm going to set the parent control to be the center of gravity. This will be the parent of my head effector and my abdomen effector. It will also be the parent of my head up and my abdomen up. So if I now look at the updated rig and the pose node, we'll see that the head and the abdomen are following the center of gravity. There is, however, a problem with this setup. The rotation of the head, which will be controlled by the up vectors, will work perfectly fine with this setup. The direction the head is facing, however, is different. Sometimes you want to have the body move without the head following the movement of the body. So you want the movement of the body, but you want the target of the head to stay static. So we actually will need to make some extra controls, and these controls will allow both the head and the abdomen to be controlled globally as well as locally. So to do this, we'll need to get a delete joints node. I'll then select the group members for this node, and we'll select the head effector and the abdomen effector. I'll then set this node to delete non-selected points. One of the things which we'll also have to do is remove the controls that are currently attached to the rig. And we must ask, when should we attach the controls in this rig? We can of course add another attached node and attach the controls after we've created the new points. Or I can move this node to before the current attached control geometry node. I'm going to take the latter option. Next I'll have to turn these points into potential controls. To do this I'm going to get an attribute wrangle node, and in this attribute wrangle node I'll set the name, @name, and this will be set with the sprintf function. This will allow us to edit the string for the name. I'll start with a percentage sign and s. This will say we're passing a string into this name, and this will be followed by global. This will be the name for my global control. I'll then have a comma and we'll add a second argument. This argument will be set off our current name. So I'll use @name, and then we'll specify the bones name but without a suffix. To do this I'll use square braces. I will add a colon. This will specify that we're including all the characters up till this point, and then we'll have -3. This will mean we specify up until the last 3 characters. For this joint, the last 3 characters would be effector. We can now look at the names, and we now have a head global point and an abdomen global point. I can then duplicate this attribute wrangle node, and instead of global, we'll set this name to be local. And we should now have a head local and an abdomen local joint. We should make sure that both of these points are actually inheriting transforms. In this case they are. We can then merge these 2 points with the existing points for our controls. I will then neaten up this network. So I now have my controls, and they're feeding into my attached control geometry. And I'm going to change the look at control so that it's no longer attached to the head effector. Instead, it should be attached to the local controller. So it will be @name is equal to an asterisk and then local. This will look for all the controls with local in the name, and that should only include the 2 that we have just created. If I use the rig pose node, I'll now be moving my local controls. We now need an extra control which we can attach to our global controls. I'll duplicate the local control setup. This should then be connected to the merge node. I'll rename the blast node to look at global. I'll change the uniform scale in the transform to be 0.17, and I'll change the color from red to ochre. I'll also need to change the name attribute to look at global. We can then return to the attached control geometry node. I can add an operation, and I'll set the group with @name, a wildcard, and then global. This way we'll select all the points with global in the name. I can then set the control to be look at global. So I've now updated the geometry for the controls. Next I should work on the parenting. So I'll return to my reparent joints node. I'll make sure that only the head up and abdomen up are children of the center of gravity. The head and abdomen effector joints should no longer be parented. Instead, what will be the children of the center of gravity will be the local joints. So the parent will be center of gravity, and I'll set the children with @name, a wildcard, local. So my global controls like my head effector and my abdomen effector, along with my head and abdomen global controls, are all under the root, while my local controls are situated beneath the center of gravity control. The head up and the abdomen up are also following my center of gravity. Now finally what we'll need to do is we'll need to blend the position of the effector between the global and the local control positions. To do this, I'll need a rig attribute VOP, and this node will plug in directly after my rig pose node. This operation could also be performed with the blend skeleton node or the blend shapes node. I will enter this node and I'll get a set point transform node. I'll then need a get point transform node. The point that I'm going to be setting is my head effector. This is my original point and its position will be blended between the head global and the head local. Since this is the point we'll be setting, I'll plug the point number into the set point transform node. I will also temporarily plug the transformation into this node as well. I'll duplicate this node. The name should be head local. If I plug this node into my transform, the head effector shifts to the position of the head local control. I'll duplicate the get transform node again, and the name here will be the head global. I'll now blend between these positions using the blend transforms node, and in this case we'll do a linear blend, blending global transforms between these two controls. I'm not going to be doing anything particularly complicated at the moment. It's possible to separate the blend rotation and the blend translation, but I'm going to leave this as it is for now. If I change the bias, my head effector now blends between the local and the global controls. I'll re-enter the node and I'll promote the bias parameter to make it easier to access. So I now have my translation and my rotation being blended properly for both of these points. I can now duplicate this node, and we'll repeat this process for the abdomen. This node will be connected to the previous one, and we can enter it. We can then change the names of our selected joints. First will be the abdomen effector, and this will blend between the abdomen local and the abdomen global. We can now blend our abdomen controls as well, and in the next video we'll add the solvers for the head and the abdomen.